What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shane Kubis. We're back after a brief hiatus, during which, of course, everything happened.
Yeah, to say the least. Normally, this time of year, it's pretty safe for both of us to kind of go do some stuff that we needed to do for different reasons. But of course, not so much this time.
Yeah, during our little break, you get a major retirement, you get a lot of news stories coming from the media and just various arms of the Steelers, and of course, we're out for all of it. So,
Yeah,
but we're back, so we're just going to break everything down today that we missed during our week or so off. So, the big thing, of course, is Stephon Tuitt announcing his retirement on June 1st, which I think we were kind of getting this pattern of being really wrong about things,
yeah,
and being proven wrong relatively quickly, which I guess is better than it taking a while.
that's true. Yeah,
Because we thought we kind of took Cam Hayward at his word, and it seemed like a lot of the defensive linemen thought Tua would be back, so it wasn't just him, and he kind of surprised everybody saying that he would be retiring, not returning to the Steelers.
yeah, and it sucks, obviously, not just for football reasons, but we kind of know the extent of
Hmm.
why this is the case, right? Like we know the background of what happened with Tua and probably what led to this decision, but it was still a surprise just because, like you said, Hayward seemed pretty confident about it. The rest of the defense seemed confident. And, there probably was a point during this offseason, especially that Tua had planned to come back. And
Hmm.
maybe it was getting to that point where if he was going to come back, he had to start getting ready. And I think his heart probably just wasn't in it. And he realized that.
Yeah, and it is only voluntary OTAs, but you start kind of thinking, okay, like I have to get my body back in shape, do all this, and
Yeah.
at some point you're probably just like, I just really don't want to do that. He's made a decent amount of money in his relatively short career, so it's like, I really don't have to do this. Like, so I'd rather do other stuff, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
I totally respect his decision. Just from a fan standpoint, as a Steelers fan, like this just sucks because like
Yeah, it
he's a great
does.
player when he is healthy, and you were kind of hoping that he would be back to help get this defense back to where it was, 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, and I think that as much as he would have been a big help, obviously, I'm hoping that things work out for him.
Hmm.
Personally, I do think that, for the most part, this probably is the right decision for the time being at least. We'll see
Hmm.
what happens with in the future. Hopefully he stays around the team in some capacity over the years or so, whatever it may be. But from a football standpoint, this definitely does force some guys into some more prominent roles like they had to last year, namely Wormley and probably DeMarvin Leal, the rookie as well.
Yeah, so luckily you'll have Alualu ideally back, and hopefully he
Yes,
can stay
yeah.
healthy at nose tackle, and then you can put Wormley back in as the other defensive end, which he was played very well last
Hey,
year.
he's a very
So
good season, yeah.
he's gonna obviously have a bigger role this year, so that'll be interesting. But maybe they can rotate him in Alualu, and it seems like they're bulking to Marvin Leal up, so he's gonna play more of an interior role at least to start. So
Mhm.
he'll be kind of one of those rotational players, which I think as the season goes on, he'll his playing time will increase on a week to week basis.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, and I think that we're much more prepared for this, right, in
Hmm.
general, between Lil coming in and Loudermilk going in the second year,
Hmm.
Montravius Adams showing up in a big way last season, like, the depth there is much more prominent than it was last year at the same time, so
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
not
think.
as worried about it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be scrambling for bodies like there were
No.
last year. And like we'll come back to this later, but like Loudermilk is apparently bulked up, so he's kind of now he's
Yes.
really acclimated to the NFL. But we'll come back to that a little later. So with this retirement and the timing of it, it clears about $9 million in cap space for the Steelers this year, which gives them just under $20 million in total. Um, which I think in the short run that's good for guys like Minka and Deontay
Yeah.
because that frees up money this year, makes it easier for them to sign. And they're both, I guess, because they're both free agents, they'll play this year under that number, but it just makes it a little easier for the Steelers to move money around if they want to sign them to bigger deals.
Yeah, I think especially for Minka, like, if they do wanna try to get a deal done prior to the season
Hmm.
or somewhere during it, they can now use this year's cap space to try to mitigate some of the cap impact down the
Yeah,
road, which I
exactly.
think that makes it much more likely that they try to do that, especially with him.
Hmm.
I think Deontay, they're still comfortable letting him play it out, but for the most part, Minka's probably the one we should be looking out for here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, there's been a lot of talk about, are they going to trade for somebody? Are they going to sign somebody? Um, it's kind of like how they did with Trey Turner last year, where you make this late addition due to a kind of surprising injury slash retirement.
Mhm.
So the guy that I'm interested in is Eddie Goldman, who got
Yes,
cut by
yeah.
the Bears, and he's more of a nose tackle, so it's not exactly a perfect fit, but he's still pretty young and was such a good player when he was healthy that I would just think he'd be really fun in this defense.
Yeah, I think as much as we did lose a 5 technique and not a nose,
Mm-hmm.
we have much more depth now and better
Yeah.
players as backups that would have been able to come in at 5 tech opposed to true nose. Like Goldman, I think would be a great fit, even if he doesn't have to play that much, assuming Alualu can maintain a starting role now that he's back from injury. He's still more of a need than we would actually have at 5 technique, I think, at this point.
Yeah. And the other name that I've seen a lot of people kick around is Larry Ogun Joby, who
Yeah.
was supposed to sign a big deal with the Bears this offseason, but failed a physical.
Mhm.
And he's been with the Browns, he's been with the Bengals. He's a good player. And
He
he
is,
just
yeah.
has the injury thing, but I just don't really know if he fits this defense. And I think we kind
I
of
don't
thought that with
yeah.
Alualu to an extent, but he's like I feel like I just think of him as more of like a pure 3 tech defensive tackle. Like he's
Yes.
not going to be a run stuffing nose. I don't really know if he can play 5 tech, 4-eye, that kind of stuff. So I just don't know if that
Yeah.
one works.
I really feel like it wouldn't be in his best interest to go to a team running our scheme. I think that he is best as a 3 technique. So, not saying he couldn't play other positions, but I don't
Mhm.
think he'd be playing up to his strengths if he's asked to play something else.
Yeah, I this is another random one that I just saw today. I saw somebody mention trying to sign Ndamukong Suh to play, which he's definitely up there in age, and he's still
Uh,
playing pretty well.
he's fine. He's still a good player, but
That'd be fun. But the other one I thought of was Nick Williams, who the Steelers actually drafted a long
yeah,
time ago,
right,
and
yeah.
has carved out a nice little niche for himself as a rotational defensive lineman. I think he was most recently with the Lions, but
Yes,
they
yeah.
kind of run that funky Rams defense, so he would be a scheme fit. It'd be kind of funny for him coming back after. I think he was. I wonder what year he was drafted. I can't remember off the top of my head
Was
now,
it
but
like
I was gonna say
2011?
like 2013 or something.
Okay.
Um, um
Feels like
there's
he
a
feels like he's been around a long
he was
time.
2013.
20 was it 2013? Okay.
Yes, yeah. So he's drafted by the Steelers, and he played 2 years with the Chiefs, a year with the Dolphins, a few years with the Bears, and last 2 years with the Lions. So he was I want to say 7th round pick. Yes, yeah, 7th round in 2013. Didn't really play for the team at all because he was on IR, and then just
Yeah.
was on practice squad. So, but I mean, he's been around the league for a long time. He kind of fits. He would obviously fit what they liked in terms of playing defensive end for them. So, that'd be kind of a fun little reunion.
Bargain bin player too, won't cut into much cap space at all to
Yeah.
bring him in,
Yeah, and
so
that's just if you, feel like you need a body, which again, they might not necessarily know. I think if they are gonna make a signing, they'd wanna go after somebody who
more
is gonna
impact,
be
yeah.
like, they're actually gonna invest that money for a real purpose. So I was listening to a different podcast, and I kind of came up with this question in my mind about the 2014 Steelers draft class, where you had Ryan Shazier in the 1st round, Stephon Tuitt in the 2nd round, and Martavis Bryant. I want to say in the 3rd, or was it the 4th?
It was the 4th round,
It
I
was the
think,
4th
yeah,
round. Okay.
pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find that draft class. But in the meantime, I was thinking about which of those players had the greatest amount of unrealized potential.
Huh. I I think it comes down to how good you think Shazier was as he has his career ended.
Hmm.
Because like, Bryant was an unbelievable talent,
Hmm.
right? Just from a physical specimen, he made unbelievable plays in a short time with us. He probably had the most room to grow, probably, I think, because
Hmm.
I think Shazier, by the time that his career ended, unfortunately, I think he was a very, very good player all around.
Hmm.
So I think he was closer to realizing his potential. It just didn't obviously happen for medical reasons, whereas Bryant, obviously, we know got in his own way. So I would say Bryant, because Tuitt just came off one of the best seasons we've seen in a long time by a Steelers defensive player, honestly, in my opinion,
Hmm.
especially from the interior. So he kind of got the chance to show what he really could do. It just didn't last because of circumstances. So
Yeah, and so Bryant was 4th round because Dree Archer was the third
that's
round
right.
pick.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I part of me leans toward Bryant having the highest, the most unrealized,
Right.
because there was talk that if he kept his head on straight and they kind of started to build the offensive passing attack around him a little more, there was talk of Randy Moss kind of talent, because just
Right.
how
Yeah.
insanely athletic he was, both before and after the catch. He was just an absolute, I think his nickname was Alien because of how crazy he was to watch.
Yeah, he moved differently than guys
Yeah.
at his with his size profile just
Yeah.
almost ever do, and, that's why I say, I think if you're just going off of unrealized potential, it kind of has to be Bryant because of
Hmm.
he did have some good seasons, obviously, but marred with, obviously, his issues, but at least with Shazier and Tuitt, you kind of got to see the type of players they probably were going to be, just not as long as you wanted them to be.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like Tuitt kind of reached his peak,
Right,
like
in
at that season, and like I
2020,
think
yeah.
I'm not sure if he would have gotten back to it, but like he would have been like, had he stayed healthy, been like consistently a very solid,
Yes.
good starter, like kind of like Aaron Smith level kind of player. That's like, a very good player for the team, but isn't like a Hall of Fame or anything. With
Right.
Shazier, he was kind of just reaching like his apotheosis as a player,
Right.
like right when the
Exactly.
injury happened, like. And I think a lot of people have said, like, if he doesn't get hurt, like, they probably beat the Patriots in that, in the Jesse James game. Then they get the 1 seed. They don't have to play the Jaguars. And if they did have to play the Jaguars again, they probably beat them because of that's how impactful Ryan Shazier was to that defense.
His range was just
Yeah,
unbelievable. It just
crazy.
it makes when you have a guy that, and that's what we obviously hoped Bush could be, and
Mhm,
hopefully we'll see more of that this year. But when you have somebody who has the athleticism and the range that he showed at middle linebacker in a defense like this, it's just so hard to do anything against that because of how much pressure we're getting up front, and then having him sit behind that.
mhm,
Our corners obviously we struggled at corner for quite some time now at
mhm.
this point, but it didn't matter as much whenever we had guys like him out on the field because he could cover up a lot of the mistakes that they might make. And now we
Yeah,
don't have that, obviously, and we didn't have it at the time.
yeah. I mean, I think that there's a realistic case to be made that if he doesn't get hurt, like he is what Darius Leonard is today.
Yeah, the same
As a
type of
player.
player.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that it would have been interesting to see, like, how he would have been paid. You saw a guy like Fred Warner get a big contract, Darius Leonard obviously get a big contract. Like, the Steelers do value inside linebacker very highly. So you
they
have
do.
to imagine that had he stayed healthy and kind of just stayed on, even just like kind of, even if he had kind of kept up the trajectory of 2017 season, then kind of just plateaued at that, like you have to imagine that they would have given him, one of those like 5-year mega deals, even though he's an off ball linebacker.
You would assume so, yeah, because it
Yeah.
just his skill set meant so much for a team
Hmm.
that was lacking in the back end a little bit at that time period, and it would have given them the ability to not have to worry as much about it while they figure it out, versus reaching for guys or trying to target those positions so heavily.
Yeah, I think that might be end up being like one of the greatest like what if biggest Steeler like ripple effect
Mm-hmm.
events, especially like even in the last decade, but maybe in this century and in Steelers history overall. Like, kind of like what if they draft Dan Marino in
Instead of
1983?
getting, yeah,
What if Neil O'Donnell doesn't lose his mind in the Super Bowl?
yeah,
What if
yeah,
this one goes the other way, but like what if Ben doesn't tackle Nick Harper in the
right,
India
right,
in the
yeah,
Colts playoff game? And then like what if Ryan Shazier doesn't have that injury against the Bengals? How different are the Steelers? Like, do they make the Super Bowl that year? How does their defense change moving down the line? So just a very interesting thing to kind of follow that down the rabbit hole.
yeah, absolutely.
Other quick little news. So quick little note. Brandon Hunt is no longer on the Steelers website as part of the front office. He's moving to the Eagles I
Yeah,
believe he's their director of player personnel or something.
yeah, he is
Um,
something along those
director of
lines.
scouting,
Yeah,
something like that. And then they've done a lot of like shuffling with the scouting staff, which is not that big of a deal because most scouts are on year-to-year contracts. So you see guys just not get their deals renewed, and they brought in some other guys from other places. So I think that's just kind of the general carousel you'd see at the end of any given league year.
right.
So not just wanted to give the update on Brandon Hunt there, but we'll move on to the OTA storyline. So like we said, we missed last week, and of course a lot of stuff developed at OTAs, a lot of stuff to discuss. Shane, where do you want to start? Because like I said, there's a lot of things we can get into.
I mean, I think we should probably start with the thing that people were talking the most about, even though it wasn't really that big of a deal, which was Deontay Johnson not reporting and now deciding to report to
Right.
OTAs.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly how many days he missed. I think it was only like 1 or 2,
It wasn't
honestly.
many.
No,
Let me put it that way.
no.
It definitely
So
wasn't a whole
he
lot.
so he did show up, and there wasn't a lot made about it. He was saying, like, I don't even think he said like he didn't even say like I was holding out. Like maybe he just
No.
said like something to do.
Right. Yeah.
So he just missed the first season, but now he's back. He's at practice. He's doing all that stuff. So no real holdout there. And like we talked about, like I think he gets that he's not in a position of strength in terms of his leverage relative to the other guys in his draft class that are going to be looking for new contracts.
Yeah. I think the problem with him, obviously, at this point, is one, he's dealing with the Steelers.
Hmm.
Who are not good. We've already seen the Titans didn't even do it for for
Yeah,
AJ Brown. They're not the team that's going to give him a deal that he probably wants to take if he's going to
yeah.
take one right now, right?
The
I,
Steelers will give you a deal if you are TJ Watt or like maybe Minka
right.
Fitzpatrick. So yeah, he's gonna have to prove himself this year for sure. And like we said, OTAs for him are important because he has to build that chemistry with the quarterbacks, not naming
Yeah,
Super
it
Bowl.
matters. It's more in his best interest to just work with what he's got. Know that if he plays as well as he has the past couple years, if it's not the Steelers, someone's going to pay him a significant amount of money to be a receiver for them. We know
Absolutely.
this. I mean, I'm sure at this point he'd probably be happy with freaking Christian Kirk money. Unfortunately, the way that the receiving
Yeah.
market's going. So like, I mean, like, I would probably be happy. Obviously,
Anybody would be happy with Christian Kirk
so
money.
it's just funny. Like he has to understand, and I think a lot of the other receivers probably understand this too. Is based on how the free agent market worked with receiving and how the trade pieces that got moved around a receiver got paid. They're going to get their money. Now, if they want it with their team, obviously, then they have to try to use their leverage. But if they don't really care that much, who's paying that money, which a lot of these guys probably don't too much, they know as long as they play like they have played and do as much as they can for the team while they're there, someone's going to pay them that money.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this off the top of my head, but like I'm
Mhm.
wondering if there's like a scenario where the Steelers would like deal him at the deadline.
I mean, there's only one scenario I could think of, and that is that they know that this team is not a playoff team by any
Yeah,
means,
which
and they
yeah,
accept that, and they're willing to take the highest bidder on him, and he's
yeah,
still
which
having a good season.
that's just not what the Steelers would do,
They
just
don't.
because
No,
that's
I
like
can't
only
see
like
it
that's like
happening.
week 8, and like unless they are like 0-8,
1-7 or
1-7,
yeah.
2-6, like they're not going to do that.
Even
So
then, they might just decide because they're obviously. I think they're comfortable with a comp pick for him if they
yeah,
don't proceed.
exactly.
Because I mean, who's going to pay? I mean, some team might if they're desperate enough, but probably not many teams are going to be willing to pay more than whatever the comp pick would be.
It probably because like at the rate receivers are getting paid, it's probably a third.
Yeah, it's gonna
So
have.
like
It's gonna be a
you have
third.
to get like a high. You'd need at least a third. A third and a sixth or something to get him, and that would only be for a 1 year rental, and then the right to sign him at the
Yeah,
end of
so
the
you'd have
year.
to be a team that both has the desperate need, has the money to then sign him,
Mhm.
and then has the incentive to sign him.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I just don't see that being very likely.
Yeah,
Obviously.
exactly. All right. The other thing in the wide receiver room that I thought it was interesting was that at one point Chase Claypool talked to the media, and he kind of talked a lot about how last year went, and said, he kind of owned up to a lot of his mistakes. Said, I kind of was, I made some mistakes. I should have handled it better. And he talked about even like football stuff, like, hey, like I gotta attack the ball better, not leave my feet so much. So I think that that's something that a lot of Steelers fans are happy to hear, him kind of growing up and maturing really quickly, because now him and Deontay are like the old guys in the room, as young as they are. But I think it's good to see him taking on this leadership role. And I think you're going to see this out of a lot of guys who are young in years, but will be old in experience, I guess, just because there is kind of that leadership vacuum now. So I think for at least right now, you're going to kind of see a lot of guys just step up, and there'll be kind of a leadership by committee, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, we already know Najee is going to be one of those guys,
Hmm.
right? We know
Yeah.
that about him. Ben talked about trying to like basically pass this team on to him as
Yeah.
he left. So if Chase can be one of those guys, not only is that huge just for his development and Steelers' hopes for him, but it's going to mean so much to him as a player because we know the physical talent. We've seen flashes of it, especially his rookie season, and even last year. I mean, he had his struggles for obvious reasons. We know about them, but outside of his touchdowns, it's not like he really regressed as an actual player, stat wise or production wise. It's just the little things, right? The things that professionals need to be better at, and that I think it seems like he understands and is trying to get better at right now.
Yeah. And on that note, I just looked this up. So he hasn't posted on TikTok since May 1st, which when he was at the draft, like doing draft stuff for
Hey,
the
so the
NFL.
people who hate him for that, shut up.
And so the other, so before that, there was one a few days before that, which was an ad for Theragun.
Okay.
The one before that was on March 22nd, so over a month prior, and it's
Mhm.
him working in a backyard with a jugs machine.
Right.
And then a few weeks before that's more of a joke TikTok. So
Yeah.
hey, dude's taking it seriously. Like, online bullying works.
Cyberbullying works, right?
Yes.
No, it's just it's unfortunate that we have to talk about it so much and that we had
Yeah.
to, but like because I want these guys to be able to be themselves. But
Hmm.
at a certain point, I think he understands, and the team has made it clear to him like we need to if you're going to be however you want to be off the field, if you want to do the fun stuff, you have to prove it on the field first. Like you
Yeah.
have to. And again, like Juju was in that situation where like even though he had fantastic seasons for us, he still was getting criticized for it.
Yeah.
But he wasn't getting criticized for his on-field play. He wasn't getting criticized for his mistakes on the field. At least not to the same level that Chase was last year, right?
Yeah.
So if we can clean that stuff up, he'll be able to start to be more open and free with how he wants to be outside of football.
Yeah. And I think that's just part of, growing up and being in the league more? Like, you're like,
Yeah.
is me making this like funny TikTok worth like the harassment I'll get? And like,
Right.
like the harassment's like it is dumb, but like
Yeah, it's not his
it's gonna
fault, but it
happen. So it's just
happens.
like
Yeah.
I'm just gonna avoid it by not doing it. Which that's growing up. Speaking of harassment, I want to talk about this Najee Harris story.
Mhm.
Um, so last week, there's this tweet from Mark Kaboy, and it stems
Mhm.
from Najee coming up to Steelers Nation Radio with, I believe it was Wes Euler and Arthur Moats. And they were talking about his weight. And there's been a lot of talk about from Pittsburgh media about how ripped Najee looks. Like, he looks bigger and more jacked than he was at the last
Yeah.
offseason. And if you follow like the Pittsburgh media sphere, that's what you were seeing. And so he comes up to them and they're talking, like, guessing his weight or whatever, and he says he's 244. And then Mark Kaboly tweets that out. And Mark Kaboly tweets it out with basically no context whatsoever. And now, if you had been following him, you would have seen that him and guys like Chris Carter were like, this guy is crazily built. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't see that, so they just ran with, oh, Najee Harris is Eddie Lacy.
Yeah, I know. And so I understand this is what happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
People take stories and they run with them and they make their narratives that they want to. My problem with it, outside of the obvious, is just like we should try to stop doing that so much,
Mm-hmm.
is look at this guy.
Yeah.
Look up a recent picture of him first.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to do this and put yourself out there, even if you don't care what the outcome is and you just want to get clicks, whatever, look at a recent picture or video of the guy. If he's 244, then I wish I looked like that at 244.
Yeah, just
I don't care.
I mean, like, I think I'm hoping to, like, I'm a little bit over 244, and I'm like 2 inches shorter than him, and I look absolutely nothing like that.
Right.
And
Like,
I've never
I'm
looked
sorry.
anything
If
like
that's
that.
244, then I'd say he probably could put more weight on if he wanted to. What are we doing?
The other thing he said is, he also said, like, I was listed at 232 or whatever last year, and like he was like, I was playing closer to 240 anyways. So like, it
Yeah.
isn't like the listed weight isn't, and those ones are always like kind of amorphous, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's just annoying. And you see like a lot of like people that are higher up in the football media space that like should know better and be doing their due diligence about it. And some people are just getting jokes off, and that's fine. But like,
Yeah, if you want to
just
joke
go
about
look
it,
up,
that's fine.
just go look up any video about like of him at OTA so far, and you're like, okay, that dude's in better shape than most people ever will be.
He's a freak.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, if he's 244 right now, the cuts I was seeing him make, I know it's on air and it's in OTAs. Listen, I don't care what his weight is. We shouldn't care what his weight. We really shouldn't. It doesn't matter that much. If you move like that at 244, then play
Yeah.
at 244.
That's the other thing I want to talk about, is that there's a video of him like going through like a bags drill, like in shorts and, you know, the t-shirt or whatever. And I like, for some reason, I like looked at the replies, and there were like some replies about like, oh, like he looks slow. You can tell the weight has slowed him down. I was like, these are from Steelers fans. I'm like, this is OTAs. He's not going at full speed. Like,
Even if
what?
he
Come
wasn't,
on.
even if he's going slow, he's going faster than most guys are capable of going.
Yeah. I was just like, oh
It
my
doesn't
God.
matter. He's just going through the motions. And even if he, like I said, he still looks completely light on his feet. He has no trouble. He's not laboring. He's like, it's not a thing. It's not.
Like,
People can make it a thing if they want, but
people just need to recognize, like, these are voluntary OTAs. Like, this is mostly like for install and to like warm up your body. Like, you're not going at 100% full speed, everything. Because, and I saw another tweet, and this was on the video where he kind of had that like tackling dummy, was kind of like almost used like a battering ram against the other running backs to try to like practice like, holding the ball properly. And I saw somebody tweet about how like, oh, this drill is stupid because like he could tear his ACL doing this. It was like, he could tear his ACL by walking down the hill to the practice field. Like, you can't, like, and I get it. Like, the more stuff you do, like, the more likely it is. But like, at some point, you have to practice. And then I also read up about that drill, and he originally, they had like some training camp intern like as the guy holding the bag, and apparently, you know, the training camp intern is not built like Najee Harris, so he can't hit them as hard. So he's like,
right.
give me the bag. And so he's, you know, doing this, and it's like, this is fine. Like that, like, first you get the plus points for like leadership and taking ownership and doing that as the leader of the group. And
Wanting
two, it's
to
like,
make the drill better. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, anything he's doing at OTAs he could tear his ACL. Like, come on, like, let's not do this.
You know what I would have done if when I saw that? You should have just taken the picture. Remember the game last year where he was completely horizontal, but his knee was completely straight up, and he didn't hurt himself at all. I've been like, yeah, he didn't tear his ACL here, so I'm not that worried about him tearing it, throwing bags at guys. Like, the dude is made of rubber. I don't know how. There's 10 times last year I was like, yeah, his season's done. And then he walks to the huddle, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess we don't have to worry about that.
And again, I'm sure that he is not, you know, attacking this bag thing with like full force.
No, he just wants to give him a better look than the intern was giving him.
Exactly. So that just annoyed me too. So a lot of BS stuff around Najee. All right, we got some more. What else? What do you want to talk about next?
Derek Watt's possible not really having to worry about his job, maybe possibly.
Yeah, that's wild. So the media talked Derek Watt recently, and he said that basically him and Connor Hayward aren't playing the same position this year, so
Right.
they're not really competing with each other, which I found quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people don't really like Derek Watt's cap number and his
Yeah.
usage on this team,
Yeah.
but you're paying him that much to play special teams, which you can make the argument that that's not worth it, but he's really good at it. So
Yeah. He's
whatever.
great.
And I think I think with Connor Hayward, like especially with given his jersey number, he is going to be playing more tight end. And if you've watched any Matt Canada offense, you know that the wing tight end, the U tight end, whatever you want to call it, like they're on the field a ton. And this team does need a third tight end. And granted, usually the third tight end they've used in the past is much more of like a inline blocking or even like an extra offensive lineman type. I think now that third tight end is going to be a more mobile piece. That'll be Connor Hayward.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I think Hayward's going to be great at doing that if they ask him to do it. So it's not really a concern of mine. I do think it's interesting, though, that they're making it pretty clear, at least from what Derek's saying, that his spot is going to be up to him playing up to snuff, not so much dealing with Hayward as a competitor, which I think it makes sense because we know what we're getting with Watt as a special teams player. And if we do need a true fullback, Watt is probably a better true fullback when we do need one on the field than Hayward could provide. So I think it's fine. I wouldn't worry too much about it from team. Like you said, if anybody's looking at the cap number situation, like we have plenty of cap space right now. Unfortunately, part of that's because of Tuitt's situation, but we're not strapped for cash. And if we really needed the cash that bad, I guarantee they're not going to worry about Watt's cap hit. They'll either ask him to take a pay cut or they will cut him if necessary. That's what the Steelers do.
Yeah, it's so that was dumb as well. But I think that we're going to talk more about how the offense is going to break down. I think probably next week's episode because there's a lot of numbers I want to get into, and I think that'll be a fun conversation. But
oh yeah, for sure,
that will pertain to kind of this discussion. Do we want to talk about? I guess we kind of talked about some of the defensive stuff earlier. I guess we'd mentioned it, so we can come back to it. So with the defensive line, I'm very interested to see, kind of the snap splits between guys like Isaiah Loudermilk, who, like we said, is bulked up a lot. Montravius Adams, who had a lot of nice plays last year. And even Carlos Davis, if he's back and healthy, he's a decent, like, rotational nose tackle. Just really as long as there's no, Henry Mondo, Daniel Archibong kind of guys out there, I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's why I feel better about the situation going into the year than we did last year when Tuitt went down, right? We know that this team has more established players now. You hope that Loudermilk makes a step up. I think that his play strength hopefully will kind of get a little bit better with the added weight. He's always been a great effort guy. It was part of the reason why, as much as we didn't like the pick at the time, I understood he was a Steelers defensive lineman in every sense of the word, right? He was exactly the type of guy they want. And now he's fitting it even better now that he's bulked up a little bit. So I'm hoping for a decent, leap from him with whatever playing time he gets, but not as worried about that depth like we talked about.
I would think that what will happen essentially is that Wormley will be like your every down starter. If they need to spell him, a guy like Loudermilk will be like the rundown replacement, and then Leal will be the passing down replacement.
That would make the most sense. You want
somebody who's that has a little more of that juice athletically, maybe more just refined as a pass rusher like Leal, and somebody who you can, because like Loudermilk, you kind of put him in the B gap or kind of around the tackle. You're like, that's where you're going to be. Whereas Leal, you can move him all around and really make some confusing defensive pass rush packages. So that'll be interesting. Let's see. Did you listen to Cam on Mina Kimes' podcast?
I didn't get a chance to.
Okay. No, really fun interview.
Sure. Yeah.
He has a lot of things to say. I think one of the bigger ones that was interesting was that he was talking about how he feels that the discussion for like best defensive lineman should be Aaron Donald and Cam Hayward and everybody else versus Aaron Donald, Cam Hayward, and everybody else, which I thought was very interesting.
I mean, I understand. I mean, when you look at, he has been, in my opinion, the guy that's been one of at least a couple that are competing to try to stand up to Donald as the best guy in the business. Now, we can all agree that Donald's the best right now. I think so. And he kind of just got the bag thrown at him to prove it. Which that was an interesting signing. Not surprising, but interesting. Cam has earned the right at this point, especially the past couple of years. I can't remember a guy at his position blossoming so much so late in his career. His past couple seasons have been unbelievable for a guy that didn't even really play that much to start his career with us.
Yeah.
Like, he was definitely a late bloomer, but he made up for it with the last couple of years.
Yeah, and he talked a lot about that, like how, kind of sitting, and learning from the guys who had been there for a while, like,
Mhm.
your Troy Polamalu's, your James Farriers, your Casey Hamptons, and how that was so valuable for helping him become a leader for the team, and also like now him kind of trying to pass that on to the younger guys, like the Kenny Pickett video where he was kind of messing with Kenny, which I mean, Cam was absolutely a jokester, which is really fun to see.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend anybody go listen to that podcast because it's
Yeah.
really cool hearing. And they even kind of get into it, like about like how the run defense struggled this year, and he kind of talks a lot about that and how the defense works and why it kind of fell apart, which I thought was really interesting and cool that he was being kind of honest and authentic about it. So the other, obviously, the huge story for the Steelers right now is that the QB battle is wide open. It seems like all the quarterbacks are doing pretty well thus far in OTAs. Even Mason Rudolph is pleasantly surprising. And I think the cool thing is that Mason is taking this really well. Is that he's not, he's not being a douchebag about like, oh, like I'm the guy who's been here. I deserve the starting job. He's like, no, it's competition. Like I need to go out and win. And I need to, when I've played, it hasn't been good, and I need to be better. I think that's, and he had some comments as well about being a mentor in the locker room and how somebody else, as he put it, wasn't necessarily a great mentor. Which I'm interested to get your thoughts on that.
Well, as far as that part, I'll start there. Of course, he wasn't.
Yeah,
like Ben has plenty of things that's going to make him a legend.
Ben who?
For a long time.
What Ben are you talking to? He just said somebody else. I don't know what. How do you know what Ben he's talking about?
Oh, jeez. Ben Charrington, maybe. No.
Oh yeah.
No. Don't want to talk about him. Anyway, so with Ben, like we know, right? We've known for a long time he was never going to be the guy, the type of quarterback that is going to welcome any sort of, even though it wasn't competition, it was he wasn't going to help anybody take his job now or in the future, right?
Yeah.
So this doesn't surprise me, but Mason, I think, understands that one, that doesn't help the team overall necessarily, and he's not in the position to do that. He knows that, right? And I think the way he's taken this is not only the right thing to do for the team and for himself, but it's just the right thing to do in general, right? Like, you're a player that's been around for a while. The one thing that I can't argue with as far as what he brings is experience on the team. He knows the guys. He should know the system. He can help this team to some degree, whether it's on the field or not, right? And obviously, I prefer to be off the field, but as we know. But I mean, again, this is a competition at the end of the day. If he wants to go out and win it, I really believe he's gonna have the opportunity, whether we want him to or not. He's gonna have the chance to. That's how this team works.
Listen,
But
he's got an angle for that Chase Daniel career path at this point.
Listen, that's what he should be doing, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the strategy. If
Listen,
you're Mr. Rudolph.
As Ryan Fitzpatrick leads the league,
yes,
we need
another filler guy,
yeah.
Right? And like, obviously Mason isn't nearly as fun as Ryan, but again, that career arc can be very fulfilling and very lucrative.
Yes, exactly.
So if I'm Mason, I'm saying everything I can that's right. I'm doing everything the right way. And at the very least, it'll probably land him a job for quite some time, even if it isn't a starting one.
I do enjoy that Mason is just like, he kind of can't help himself when it comes to being messy. Like he likes to just like dip a little toe in it, stir the pot.
It's like he's messing with us.
Yeah, like he knows, which
it's
I kind of like.
I can't be. I'm not mad about it at all, but it's just like funny how he's just like, I'm just gonna say all the right things. I'm just gonna throw this little bit out there.
Stir the pot a teeny tiny bit,
just enough.
And again, like it is so appropriate because like we all know, like you said, we all know like what Ben was like and how that didn't go the way it should have, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I think this, and I really don't think we're gonna know who's gonna be the starter until week 1. Like I think everybody's gonna start a preseason game, and I don't really know. I think it's gonna be really interesting. It's gonna be super different than what Steelers fans have ever had.
Yes, for sure. I think that if I had to guess, Mitch probably gets the first game. I think that Pickett might have a shot to start the second game. If not, I think Mason might start that game, and then Pickett might get the third one at that point. I think it's going to be one of the other two.
I feel like Mason is going to get the third one because that's
why
it
makes more sense. Matter. Yeah.
Steelers preseason games.
That's what I'd have to guess.
I'm wondering which ones are where. That's okay. So it's Seahawks at Steelers, Lions at Steelers. So those are the 2 home games. So I bet you. This is kind of random, but I bet you they let Kenny start the first one that's at home.
That would also make sense too. I think
Does
I think it ultimately is just going to come down to like
so?
who's
Yeah. So
playing
it's
well.
the first. The first. So the game one is home against the Seahawks.
Right.
I bet you they'll let Kenny start that one. Next one is on the road at the Jaguars. Let Mitch start that one. That's gonna be the one where you have all the starters.
Right.
And that's so you want Mitch for that. And then the last one is home against the Lions. Give Mason that one.
Yeah, he can
It
have it.
wouldn't. This is a cake preseason.
Yeah, it's
Good
not really
God.
gonna. I don't think
What
we're gonna.
happened?
I mean, preseason never really tells us a whole lot of anything anyway. But we're really not going to know
And we don't even
anything.
get the Panthers, who are the normal
Right? Yeah, I
fourth
don't
game,
know.
and they're even worse this year. It's crazy.
I don't know, but no, I think that's going to be interesting to look at to see how they play that because, like you said, it would make a lot of sense to give Pickett that first game if you can, especially because he's not going to have all the starters. You want to see what he can do in general,
I was
and
just saying from like
yeah.
he won't play him in Heinz Field thing.
That's fun
That was
too,
my
for
point.
sure. That's still fun too,
Yeah.
but I do think it's gonna come down to the wire. I do. I
Yeah.
think that Mitch is gonna do enough that he earns the right if they decide that Pickett isn't quite up to snuff yet, or if
Yeah.
they're not quite as comfortable with him. But
I know the media like isn't allowed to like tweet certain stuff from
mhm.
I guess most practices and training camps and everything, but like there's really just been nothing about like who's like taking a lead, like not a peep
No,
about
I've heard
who's
good
taking the
things about
Yeah,
both,
exactly, yeah.
but not about in comparison to each other.
There's
And
been no like separation, which is interesting. Okay, so I think this will be the kind of last story we talk about because there's kind of two, and we'll talk about the
mhm.
positive one first. So there's been a lot of really good things coming out about Brian Flores though, and how
Yes,
he's been working with not just the linebackers, but the defense as a whole. And so I think
yes.
that triumvirate of Tomlin, Austin, and Flores on the defense, like I think that assuming people can stay healthy and maybe they go out and find another cornerback, like this could be like a 2019 level special defense this year.
And that's what's so interesting is I think that the defensive coaching staff combined with the talent that they have
Hmm.
now, I don't know what better defensive coaching staff could you possibly have right now.
Yeah.
Like you have our head coach of 15 plus years,
Hmm.
who's a defensive specialist. You have a guy who was just a head coach and probably should have been another one as
Hmm.
well with Flores, and a guy who's going to be getting that type of offer probably at some point again in his career
Should
trail
be.
also.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like you have three guys who realistically, in the right circumstances, could all be head coaches in the National Football League right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and that's just hard to really contend with as far as having a coaching staff, and especially with Flores coming in at this point where we're trying to kind of get back to that 2019 level to help an offense that, yeah, we hope is going to be better than last year, but we really don't know what their ceiling is in year one and even year two in this new regime under whether it's Pickett or whoever's going to be.
Hmm.
It's going to be really important if they want to continue to compete, which we know they do. How good can this defense actually be?
Hmm. And the huge thing about this is, and like, I think this is where we talk about complementary football, is that like just the offense being able to stay on schedule with competent quarterback play
Yes.
will let the defense play so much better because so many times this defense last year, even if you kind of put aside the whole like defensive line injuries, linebacker bad play, all that, like the reason why there were so many bad stretches was because they were on the field so much because the offense
So
couldn't get
much.
anything going. And so I think that if you even just play like average, even like slightly below average level offense, just competent offense, like that the defense could take a huge step forward, assuming they stay healthy.
It's the same problem that we faced after the 11-0 start in 2020.
Yeah.
Like that defense was unbelievable. The offense was good enough for most of that time.
Yeah.
And then they started going 3-and-out 3 out of 4 drives.
Hmm.
And the defense just literally could not handle it anymore.
Yeah.
It was impossible. And like you said, they don't have to be spectacular on offense. And honestly, they don't have to be spectacular as a passing offense or really anything else. They just need to hold on to the football much more than they have in the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, and I think that we could really see. I think obviously his tutelage is going to pay the biggest dividends at inside linebacker with
Yes.
Miles Jack, who talked about like a big reason why he signed the Steelers was because he wanted
Flores,
to get
yeah.
coached up by guys like Mike Tomlin and Brian Flores, sorry. And then Devin Bush has. We'll get into more Devin Bush stuff, but Devin Bush has also talked about how having
Yeah.
Brian Flores there is a huge help for him. Getting his confidence back as a player and ideally getting back to his best form.
Right.
So we'll talk about what Devin Bush has said first, because the second part is more ridiculous. But so another part of Devin Bush's media availability, I think he was basically saying like I don't feel I have to prove anything. I don't think I'm a bust. Like, I was a first round pick. Like, I did all this. Like, I just need to go out and play better football. Which Devin Bush is. I think he's an extremely interesting player because he is so young. I think a lot of times I think he says really what he feels. Like, he is being completely honest. Just sometimes I think the way he just constructs his sentences and the words he chooses just can kind of come off the wrong way.
Yeah, and the tough part with him is like what he said when you take it all into consideration. It's not so much that he's wrong about any of it. It's like you said, the way that it's when you say that you're not a bust,
Hmm.
right? When you openly admit that and like say that out loud, people who think you're a bust are going to be mad at you for
Yeah.
saying that,
Yeah.
right? If fans who think you're not playing up to snuff are going to say you should think you're a bust,
Yeah.
which you shouldn't.
No.
You can't like that's the thing is he's not wrong about that. Like you can't consider yourself a bust and expect to like do anything with your
Hmm.
career at that point. And yeah, he has shown the flashes that you'd want from a first round pick. It just hasn't been consistent due to injury and other things. And the last part, he's right. He has to just play the football that he thinks he's capable of. And if he does that, this will go away, right?
Yeah.
The conversation about whether he was a bust, whether he was worth the pick, all that goes away if he plays a lot more like he did in 2020 before he got hurt and even parts of his rookie season. If he plays more like that, especially next to Miles Jack, that won't have to be a problem anymore.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, I think it was a weird thing to say, but I think the
Yes,
general sentiment behind it was like he's like saying like that stuff's in the past. Like, really, all I can control is like how I prepare for the future. Which I think that's a good attitude to have in general.
absolutely.
With that being said, we'll now get into the comments from Merrill Hodge from the past few days. And obviously Merrill Hodge played in the NFL for a very long time. He knows what he's talking about.
Right.
Uh, and he played running back, but you can assume he knows how to play linebacker as well pretty decently because, the other side of the coin. But he went on one of the Steelers radio stations and basically said that Devin Bush is a bust. He can't play football. He doesn't play football well. And he said that Robert Spillane is the best inside linebacker the Steelers have. Now, some people would respond with, I believe it's the video that our friend Ronnie Harder responds with the Drewski video. Where it's like, oh, what do you mean by that? Which I won't necessarily get into because I think there's another way you can take it. But this is just wrong.
So the problem with it, right, is like I don't want to assume that there's any connotations by it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't like to do that unless it's super clear.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's so messy with when you try to do that, you don't know what someone's intentions are.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, some people just aren't good at stuff. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
just not they'd sometimes say stuff that's just dumb because it's dumb, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I understand because of how dumb of a thing it is that people might jump to that conclusion because it's
Mm-hmm.
just ridiculous that if you've watched the Steelers play football in the past 2 years and your conclusion is that Robert Spillane is the best inside linebacker on the team right now, then I don't know what you want me to tell you.
They literally went out and traded for Joe Schobert because they knew
Yes.
they couldn't play Robert Spillane as a starter.
They
Because they
knew
knew how
that
bad he
they
was.
knew it could not happen. He could not
Yeah.
be relied upon to play anything other than a run stuffing role, and even then wasn't the best.
Yeah.
At that last year, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had a nice couple games with us whenever he had to step up.
Mm-hmm.
He had the big interception off Lamar in the Ravens game. He had some moments. The guy can't play in coverage. He barely can play
that's
at
what
all.
that was the thing that Hodge said. Is he said, "Oh, he's better than Devin Bush as a pass coverage." I was like, "Sir, that is objectively false. He is not."
He can't like Bush could be 30% worse than he was last year in coverage, and he's still better than
Yeah.
Spillane.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. I'm 100% with him on the whole. Like Bush did not play good football last year. Right now, you don't know what you're going to get from him. That's fine. Then you start putting Spillane over him, and I'm like, all right, listen.
Yeah, no, you
That's
didn't. You
not.
didn't need to do that. Like, that's just ridiculous. And the thing, and so that's ridiculous. But I want to go back to the Devin Bush comments and saying like, "Oh, he's not good. He's not fast. He doesn't play instinctive. He doesn't know how to play with leverage." Blah blah blah. It's like last year, yes, that was true.
Yes.
I still think a large portion of that is due to him recovering from that injury and just not having his legs under him, basically. So, and this year he's talked about how he's a lot more comfortable, he's a lot more confident in his legs. So he should get back closer to that 2019 and early 2020 form because in early 2020, before his ACL tear, Devin Bush was really good.
He was
awesome.
He was a very, very good NFL linebacker. And I think the thing that people have to understand is like I think people get the wrong idea about ACL recovery now because of how good it's been in the past 10 years. at this point, the physical toll is much less of a concern as the mental toll is.
Mm-hmm.
The mental toll of going back out there after you shredded your knee,
Mm-hmm.
after all the recovery you had to do, all the rehab, all the pain you went through to get to this point. That is the bigger deal for these players. Now, it's not the physical toll. It's not the fact that you got injured to begin with. All the medical science is getting to the point where like you can get guys back from Achilles tears in 7 months if you're
which
freaky
is
enough.
nuts.
It's not about that anymore. At this point, the bigger recovery time and the bigger hurdle is the mental part. And if Bush is right about what he says, if he's honest and he has his legs under him, he feels more confident, then it's almost a guarantee that the man's at least going to be a better player. Maybe not quite as good as we saw from him in early 2020, but probably closer to that.
Yeah. And like every ACL tear is different. So like
It
there could
is,
be other
yes.
things. And like we mentioned earlier, you also have to consider like the defensive line was really banged up in front of him. So that impacts
Yes,
it as well.
it
So
does.
I don't think you can't. I don't think you can appropriately say all these things as like fact and say like, oh,
No.
this team should cut him. Like
That's
that's just
insane. It's insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
That's not even a conversation to have with anybody.
And so with I'm not with the tack that he was taking. I'm not saying that it was what we were suggesting earlier, but I think he's playing into a Yinzer mentality where
Mhm.
he's like, I'm talking to the guy that is eating his Permane brothers, like with all the fixings, with the fries and sandwich, and he's saying, Devin Bush doesn't play the run hard enough, and that guy in his sandwich was like, he's right, like
It's
down here, you
easy.
need,
Right.
yeah,
It's easy to do, and that's what's frustrating is like, yeah, you can do that, and like you can get the popularity from that, and he doesn't even need that because he's Merrill Hodge. We know, he knows who he is, but like you can play that and it'll work. But when you say stuff like this, people who do know what they're talking about and know that you're doing it, they're gonna call you out to a certain degree.
yeah,
And I think that that's what's happening with this, and I think that's the right thing to do is to call something like this out, regardless of what his motives are for it.
yeah,
It's just bad.
yeah. I mean, it's just there's really nothing else in that is just factually incorrect. That
Right.
you can't make the claim. I think you can make the claim that like Devin Bush was bad last year, obviously, and I
Oh
would agree
yeah,
with
for
you.
sure.
I think
If you would have stopped there,
yeah,
just a
but I
quote.
also think you need to add the context to it of the injury and the defense around him, and then also, like you said, like you can't just go out and say Robert Spillane was better because he isn't, he wasn't, he never was. Like
He never was. Yeah,
no,
it's that's thing is he at no point and at any point when they were both on the team at the same time playing was Spillane ever better than what Bush has put on the field. It just
yeah,
he isn't. And if you want to think he is, then good for you. But there's no reason to think that objectively.
yeah. All right, that's gonna do it for us for this week's episode. We'll be back next week with our episode where we're gonna dive into kind of what we expect the offense to be this coming year. In the meantime, Shane, let people know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me at Shane Kugas on Twitter as always, and at SteelersATB on Twitter as well. Like I said, we've mentioned this a couple times. I definitely plan to try to go to at least a couple training camp days here now that's back on the Trub closer to me. Going to try to tweet from that if I'm able to go, and also just follow anything Steelers ATB or anything ATB in general.
Yep, you can follow me at Mitchell T. Wolf on Twitter, WOLFE. Make sure you're following around the block on Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, all that jazz.
Everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.